Hey there, it's Mark from MENWHOBULLET. Thanks so much for checking out today's video where we're going to be checking out the Dingbats Wildlife Collection notebook. I've been really excited to get into this notebook because when I first started with bullet journaling, this was one of the first notebooks that I saw out there when I was looking for everything, but I didn't think I was quite ready for it just yet. After all these years, now I know, don't wait for notebooks. If you see something that you like, you should get it, you should try it, you should mess it up, you should get inside of it. It's the only way to know if you're really gonna love a notebook. So when they offered to send this to me, I thought I would do something a little bit different. I asked for the notebook, super cool, they were awesome, but I thought that I would ask for it with grids instead of dots. Now, why would I do that? Well, you know what? You can bullet journal in anything, and I have a lot of dot grid notebooks already. So I wanted to put this paper to the test, put the notebook to the test, and really just take a look at it. And I also now have a really cool gridded notebook that I can do some other cool things inside of. So what are we gonna do with this notebook today? Well, we're just gonna try out a few things. We're gonna try out some pens, we're gonna try out some markers, we're gonna try out some stamps, and just see what normal materials that I use or that you might have at home. We're also going to use the grid paper to set up a weekly spread. Might as well have some fun with it while we're at it. And on top of the notebooks, we're also gonna try out another product from Dingbats. Not only did they send me over the notebook, but they also sent me over the Atopen brush pens that they have from their collection as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to be trying out the Dingbats notebook with the Atopen brush pens and some other stationery here as well.
The first thing that we'll do is actually talk about the specs of the notebook first, and then what we'll do is talk about the Atopen brush pens later on. I'm going to pull out all this stationery. We're going to try all of this in the paper and inside of the notebook in just a minute. So this notebook is part of the Dingbats Wildlife Collection. I chose to go with the green notebook with the deer debossed here on the front. It's an A5 plus size, so it is a little bit bigger than the normal A5. The leather cover here is 100% vegan, and you've got the debossed icon here. And what I love is on the inside of the book, whatever animal you go with on the front, you get their footprints on the inside and back cover. So super cool detail, something that most people wouldn't notice necessarily if you don't get to open the book. The paper is 100 GSM, and it's also in a silk cream color, acid-free and fountain pen friendly, which I'm very excited to try out. And each page is also micro perforated. So if you want to take out a page, you can. It's already pre-done, so you're not tearing it out. I did just try this in the back of this notebook, and you'll see you do get a little piece. It's about 2 grid squares in from the left and the right-hand side, depending what side that you're writing on. So something to pay attention to. We've got one bookmark ribbon inside of this notebook, the standard flap in the back, so a little pocket if you want to sneak things inside of. We've got the elastic band that holds this notebook shut, and then also the elastic pen holder over on the right-hand side too. I mentioned before that I went with the grid paper. You can also do dot or lined, and this grid here is in 5mm squares, which is very similar to the dot grid, which I do love. So for the pen test, we're going to try out this entire box of stationery inside of here. We're also going to take a deeper and better look at the Atopen brush pens to see how it does on the paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is use one of the inkier pens that I have. This is the Baron Fig Squire pen. This always tends to be a little bit heavier on the ink versus other gel pens. And I also have a Sharpie S gel pen here as well. So as you'll see here on the back, no bleed through, very little ghosting. Gotta love that. The next pen I'm going to use is my Ride or Die. This is the Uniball Signo. It's a very fine point pen. I don't expect this to bleed through or even go, so we're good there. The next one is going to be my Lamy. So this is a fountain pen. Inside of this, I actually have a cartridge that has my Birmingham Kohl ink inside of. This is going to have a heavier ink flow than a normal pen. So on the back here, you can see there's a little bit more ghosting on this than the other pens that we have, but not that bad, and no bleed through, which is really important. So you can use fountain pens in here and they'll work really nice. I'm also going to use 2 different sizes of a fine liner here. I know that a thinner one probably isn't going to have any problems, but the thicker one sometimes will. So you'll see that it's not that bad. Obviously the fine point one, you're gonna see less on the page versus the thicker one, but not bad at all. Here I have the Uniball Signo metallic gel pen, so we're going to use this one. And then also I have this one from Uniball. These are the Emote fine liners, 0.4 for those. So neither of them much of an issue at all. The next one I'm going to go with are these two tool pens. The first one is a blue, so it's about a 1, so a little bit thicker than a lot of the other fine point ones that are out there. Because it has that deep blue color, I expected to see a little bit, but it's actually not that bad at all. And you can barely see the metallic gunmetal color on here too. Let's go a little bit hardcore now. So I'm going to go with one of these Faber-Castell. This is the brush pen. So this is going to be a much thicker pen. And then also the Sharpie. I would never use a Sharpie in a notebook because it bleeds through almost every paper. So not expecting that to not ghost. A little itty bitty bit of bleed through on that page, but it didn't go to the other page. So that's always really good. So this paper can definitely handle some pretty good pens. So let's go ahead and go into the brush pens here, because these tend to be a little bit heavier using ink and things like that. So these are the Atopen brush pens from Dingbats. These are really nice, a newer part of their collection. You can see on here, archival quality, waterproof, bleed proof, odorless, water-based pigment ink. It does say to keep this horizontal when storing it. So if you get them, make sure that you're doing that. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and mark down what pen this is. I just always really like to do that for any of my pen tests. And we'll go ahead and just swatch these colors across the page and take a look. Now that pink one wasn't flowing super great, so I had to go over it a few times, but as you can see on the back here, there's nothing's bleeding through. It works so well inside of this notebook. I totally expected it to. I feel like if a company is going to come out with their own stationery, it better work in their own notebooks. Now I'm going to go ahead with another popular stationery item. These are the mild liners from Zebra. I love-hate with these. I love the colors. I love that they're not super fluorescent, but I don't love highlighting with these because I try to do that sometimes, and some of the ink pens that I'm using don't dry as quickly and it smears. But just these alone, if you're highlighting, coloring, using these for art on your pages, they work really well. So let's just see how they do on this paper. Go ahead and flip the page here. Nothing at all. Didn't expect it to really do anything either, but let's test everything while we're here. The last one I'm going to use is a very fluorescent one. This is the Faber-Castell text liner. So this is just super bright on the page. No ghosting, no bleed through. It looks really good. So as you can see, everything on here has very little ghosting. The only thing that kind of came through was the Sharpie, but that's in every single notebook I've ever used that happens with Sharpie pen. So no ding to Dingbats on that. And the paper is fountain pen friendly. Some pages in other notebooks do not handle fountain pens well at all. So they'll either bleed through the paper or they'll get a lot of feathering, but I think this did great. So let's try some things that I wouldn't normally always use in every single notebook. The first is going to be stamps. I love stamps. I've been growing my collection of stamps. So let's see how this notebook handles them. So I've got my Eric Small Thing stamps. Excited to have these. Let's put these onto my stamp block. And then I'm using the Versa Magic ink here. So we're just going to go ahead and pat that ink onto the stamp. Not going to overdo it, but we're going to really get it on there. Let's go ahead and press it down. Look at that. It looks really nice on this paper. So let's see how it handles. Nope. Look at that. You can barely see it on the other side. So it's not bleeding through. A little itty bitty bit of ghosting, but it's about the same amount as any of the darker, heavier ink pens that I have as well. Now, watercolor is another thing that I know some people would like to put inside of their notebooks, others don't. Let me just say up front, unless it's a watercolor notebook, do not expect it to always work. Just throwing that out there. Even some of the heavier notebooks that have even heavier GSM paper than this notebook here, they all do the same thing for the most part. So one of the things I like to do if I am going to use watercolor in a notebook, what I usually do is just wet the paint and then paint onto the paper. So don't wet the paper first and do it. And usually that works out well. But let's go ahead and test it. If I wet the paper and saturate it pretty good and then put the paint on top of it, you'll see it's a lot lighter. It gives a very cool watercolory look. That's usually when you're going to see how something reacts. So let's go ahead and flip the page. So this isn't terrible. There's no bleeding through the paper. There's just a little bit of wrinkling, but that's because I just wet this paper. So it happens in every notebook, but it doesn't look like it did anything too bad. So that actually passed the pen test. It passed the ink test. It passes the watercolor test, which is super impressive. And even though things were heavier here, like the Sharpie, it didn't bleed onto the other page. So if you accidentally drew inside of this journal with a Sharpie, you'd be okay. I do want to show you real quick about that perforated edge. So like I said, it's about 2 squares in from the middle of the notebook. So I gave myself some space as I went through here, not a whole lot of things, a little bit of a line went over, but if you wanted to pull out your pages, you absolutely could. It's a nice tear. It doesn't look all jagged and gross if there wasn't that there, so I can appreciate it. I just don't know if I would really tear out a lot of my pages in a notebook like this anyway. So the next thing that we're going to do is actually use the Atopen brush pens and go ahead and do an entire weekly spread inside of this Dingbats notebook. So to work on this weekly spread, we'll just be using our notebook and these brush pens here, some of them to create our weekly. Now what I've done is I've already gone in and I've just quickly sketched out a general idea of what I wanted to try to accomplish here. And the way I did that was to first go in and just count out the spaces that I have on this page. Now, because these pages have this perforation on the inside, I went ahead and counted 2 over from this all the way out to about the edge, maybe 1 square over. I just wanted to make sure that I had a nice squared edge, make the page as nice and even as I possibly can. That way I can do easy math versus trying to make it difficult. So for this page where I marked out, it's about 28 squares across and 42 from the top down to the bottom. Once I measured that out here, I just counted over 14, which is halfway across our page here, and just made a mark. And this is where we'll put the days of the week down the center part into the inside margins of these pages. And we'll do that in this yellow marker. I split out the rest of the page, and this will just be for notes over on the right-hand side. We did the same thing on the left. We have a small calendar over here on the left-hand side, and then 3 spaces over here for trackers. We'll be tracking sleep, we'll be tracking time for stretching, and then also for water as well. And I just have this broken out Monday through Friday, and then the different time increments or measurement increments for each one of these. I'll be using the ruler for some of the more straight edges, but everything else is going to be relatively freehand. Now for the days of the week in this section here, I'm going to use the yellow marker. As I mentioned before, these are archival quality, waterproof, bleed-proof, odorless, and work really well. So let's go ahead and just fill in these spaces. I'm going to use the bullet end of the black marker here, which is a 0.5 millimeter, and I'm going to go ahead and fill in the days of the week. So the title's here, and I'm just going to put an underline underneath the yellow that we went across here just to add a little bit of visual interest to those. And the last space down here will be for the weekend, Saturday, Sunday split. That's why it's just a little bit bigger. Go ahead and fill in the header over on the right-hand side for the notes. So just a small line and just writing in notes, nothing too fancy over here. Over on the left-hand side, we got a little bit more complex by adding in these trackers and the calendar. So the first thing I'll do is just take my ruler and I'm just going to fill in the squares and rectangles that I have for the spaces for the trackers. Anytime that I do a calendar, the way that I usually do these is I just kind of fill in the days of the week in pencil, and then I start where the start of the month is and the end of the month, and then I just fill in down the Saturday or Sunday lines. And the way I don't have to fill in every single date, but I can catch myself as I go through just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. We'll also fill in all of the extra spaces for the days of the week and the measurements for the other trackers. And then the last thing that I'm going to do here is just use the blue marker, again using the bullet end with the 0.5 millimeter tip, and just do something fun for the March header. Once everything is erased, all the pencil marks, here you go, a full weekly spread right here. We have all of our trackers on this side for sleep, and what I'll do here is just probably do like a bar chart or something like that. For our stretch tracker, I'll probably do like a line bar or something like that and connect the dots. I always like the way that those always look, and same thing for the water. We'll put notes in some tasks in the day today as we know what's going on, and then just have all our other rapid logging over on the right-hand side in the notes section.
All right, that was great to check everything out, see how everything was going, and I hope that you liked my honest review of this notebook as well. If you're interested in picking up your own notebook from Dingbats, I'll go ahead and link to their notebooks and their website down below in the descriptions. I always love checking out new products, and hopefully you like these type of videos as well. If you do, make sure you subscribe, hit that thumbs up. It lets me know that you like what's going on. And if you have any comments as well about this notebook or anything you saw in today's video, I'd love to hear from you as well. I love reading comments and going through them and talking with you about notebooks and products and anything else that's going on. It's been great. Again, thank you for checking out today's video, and I'll talk with you very soon. See ya.